I've always been afraid for being myself. I had a fear of expressing myself authentically because every time I did that in the past, I would be criticized, I would be judged, I would be hated by the people around me. That made me feel very alone, and that made me feel like I didn't fit in. It made me genuinely feel that there was something wrong with me because the way that people spoke to me whenever I was trying to be my authentic self, it was like I was a problem. So in order for me to cope and to fit in with society, in order for me to cope and fit in with the expectations of other people, I kept myself living inside of a bubble of somebody that I never wanted to be. And I always wondered why I was lost. I always wondered why I don't feel like I'm myself. I always wondered, like, why am I just so empty? And perhaps that is because I was suppressing myself, suppressing the real version of who I have to be. You know, I'm a guy who likes to be quite controversial in the terms of normal people. Whenever I say something, it goes completely against what the expectations are of others. And I've always had that since I was a kid. I've always had questions. I always was questioning everything. I don't know why that was, but it's just authentically me. Most people don't like that. I've learned over the years, people don't like that because when somebody challenges their perspective, when somebody challenges their view of life, then it's like they're being confronted with the fact that maybe what they're thinking is not right. When in fact, they have lived their entire lives living like that. When in fact, everything and everybody is promoting that this is the right way. But then when somebody comes and says, maybe that is not the right thing to do because of this and this and this fact, they just get an error. Their whole identity starts to be tested. And people don't like that. So maybe that has been a factor to why people tell people like us to not be this way because the way that we think is wrong, because the way that life has worked so far for them is the right way. But then again, life is different to all of us. So as I was growing up and me trying to be my authentic self and couldn't, because whenever I did, I never had friends. Whenever I did, I felt very lonely. I was criticized by my peers, the kids that were along with me in elementary school. I was not necessarily bullied in the sense that I was beaten up, but I was excluded from groups. I was excluded from everything because I was different. I said different things. I thought differently. Parents didn't like that, and the kids didn't like that either. So for most of my life, I grew up feeling awkward, feeling insecure, feeling lonely. And then when the time came to go to high school, I wanted to go through a complete shift. And it was at high school that I thought to myself, I don't want to be lonely anymore, so I want to fit in with everybody. So I started smoking weed in order to fit in with the cool kids. I started doing drugs in order to fit in with the cool kids. I started going to parties in order to fit in with the cool kids. And yeah, I was part of the cool kids at a certain point. And people started seeing me as cool, like, oh, he does this thing and that thing. But what's so crazy is that I never really felt like I was me. The more I did that, the more distracted I was and the more lonely I felt. And for many years, I've lived a life of being suppressed. That whenever my real authentic desires came up, I ignored them and I pushed them to the side. I wanted to be an artist for many years of my life, but I never took action for multiple reasons. I never took action because I was being told that this is not the right thing to do. This is not the way that you can make money. This is not the way that you can create a sustainable life. At the end of the day, what is a sustainable life? A sustainable life is that what people have labeled stability with. Stability for most people is buying a house. Stability for most people is buying a car, a nice car that they get on finance for some reason because they can't pay the full price. Stability is getting married at an early age and getting children and then working your sweet job up until you reach the age of retirement. And when you retire, you have your house with your mortgage that you've been paying off for like 50 years. And then you can start living your life. That idea always sounded so wrong to me. But okay, that's what people see as stability. And you're right. When you want to be an artist, when you want to create music, when you want to be a producer, those things aren't necessarily options that you can take right away. So I listened to the path of what was seen as this is the right path, but how did I feel? Depressed. I was absolutely depressed, not only because of living that path, because I was ignoring that what was right for me at that time. I was ignoring the action that I needed to take to figure out if music is actually the thing for me. Now, eventually, I broke free from the chains. I took action. Then I realized, okay, this isn't for me. Not for the reasons that people told me, but for the reasons that the way that I see myself, the way that I see my life in the future, music and the environment that you'll be thrown in isn't something that I want to be raising my children in. It isn't something that I would be promoting to my children. It isn't something that I would tell my wife, like, hey, let's go to a hip hop party, you know? No, there's a lot of degeneracy involved, and I'm actually not for degeneracy. So there's already a contradiction between me and the thing that I want to do. But I wouldn't have figured this out if I didn't take the action for myself, and if I didn't fully focus on being authentically me and discovering that interest that I had. Because we all have interests. We all have things that we authentically, genuinely desire to witness and to experience for ourselves. And whenever we hold ourselves back from doing that, no matter what that is, then we will start living a life that is below our capabilities. We start living a life that is not us. We start living a life and we reduce the impact that we can have in the world, and also the impact that we can have in our environment. Our radiance, our energy just starts to be limited, because you are limiting yourself of discovering the real thing that you have to do. Now I took the action on discovering if music was for me and if that was the right thing for me to do, I discovered that it wasn't. That then eventually led me to now being a YouTuber. Well, not necessarily a YouTuber, but I use YouTube as my way of promoting my message, my way of interacting with people and creating that connection. Because I discovered that I love talking about these topics. I discovered that I love being somebody who can create awareness. I love being someone who likes to talk about being afraid, who likes to talk about discomfort, who likes to talk about overcoming resistance, because these are the things that I'm automatically doing for myself, as that has been one of the most challenging things that I've had in my life that I had to teach myself. Sometimes I see myself as a philosopher, but I guess that is maybe ego that starts coming in. So I try not to focus too much on that. But for many years, I've allowed my desires to be suppressed. And the suppression of my desires came from also the fears that other people had. My parents always told me to not do it. My parents always tried me to drive me down on a path that seems stable, because they don't want their kids to be living in pain. They don't want their kids to be living in discomfort. And that is absolutely normal. It's a natural defense mechanism that parents have. I also understand my parents. Why? Because they have been through a lot of pain themselves. They had to leave the countries they were living in order to travel to foreign countries, to work with foreigners in order to make money and to provide for their families. They had to move from Portugal to Russia, from Russia to Portugal again, and then to Belgium. And then my father had to travel to Germany as well, while we, my brother and me and my mother, were staying in Belgium, in a foreign country already. They didn't speak the language. It wasn't easy for them to build a life over here, and there was no roadmap on how do I live in Belgium. No, you had to figure things out for yourself. And my parents don't want me to go through that, and neither do they want my brother to go through that. So they want to protect us as much as possible. But this is the issue. Whenever you try to protect people too much, they never grow and learn things for themselves that they need to learn. There was this chapter in the book called The Way of the Superior Man, which was very beautiful, and that opened my eyes to the reality that we actually have to live in order to develop ourselves. And the chapter said, live as if your father was dead. Now, the reason behind why you have to live for a period of time as if your father was dead is because there's always an expectation that your parents set on you, especially your father. He sets the tone. He's the one who keeps his foot on the ground and says yes or no. That can limit you if you want to discover who you want to be. And allowing yourself to live as if your father was dead will have you living without that pressure and those eyes that are looking at you for the expectations that he has set for how you have to live. At the end of the day, the way that they have grown is by leaving their families behind and discovering life for themselves, is by making the sacrifice, is by going through the discomfort, going through the pain. And that is how they have managed to develop themselves. And a lot of people have gone through that. But now the pain that has been linked to it, perhaps people have never learned how to properly manage that pain. And now we are in an age where the self-awareness is at a height. I'm not the only one who thinks this way, I'm pretty sure, because there are a lot of people who have contradicted the standard way of life, the standard way of how people used to live, have seen the opportunities that are now presented by the sacrifices that the previous generations have made, and that has made sure that now a different way of life can be lived. But the same principle still applies. You have to overcome discomfort. You have to overcome pain. You have to live away from the expectations of other people, because otherwise you will live a very limited life. Imagine if my dad stayed in Portugal. Portugal is known for being a very beautiful country, but having very low wages. My dad had to do it. If he didn't leave Portugal, he would be broke and probably living on the street, or just suffering way more than he would than if he took on the suffering for traveling, going to a foreign country and making the money over there, and then from there traveling to other countries in order to make money and to provide for the family. Was it hard? Yes, absolutely. Does he regret it? Maybe. Maybe he regrets not having seen his family. And that is where this generation can come in and make an improvement on the pain and the struggle that was back then, is that people can now work from home. You can build an online business literally from your room, make money, and then you can close off your computer, go downstairs and be with your family. You don't have to travel 6 hours every day. The commute is way shorter. It's 2 minutes to go downstairs and to see your family members. Times have changed, but we must never forget the same principles as I've mentioned. Discomfort, pain, and yes, sacrifice as well. Not getting yourself to step away from the expectations of other people, especially your family members. That will keep you limited. That will keep you living with change. You will be locked into what they want you to live. And whenever you make a decision that is not aligned with what they want, they will try to correct you. And over time, as the quote goes, you are the average of the 5 people who you hang around with most. And if you are oftentimes in the presence of your parents and you talk about the things that you desire and the goals that you have, their fears will come into play, and that will influence the decisions that you want to make. And as a result, you limit yourself. And you will be living a very inauthentic life, and you will be afraid of being yourself, and you'll be questioning whether or not that what you want to accomplish is actually even the right thing. But be very vigilant. You have to surround yourself with the people who think the way like you think, but not to say that they need to be big dreamers. You have to dream big, but you also have to be realistic in the situation. Now, for example, I want to quit working my full-time job by the end of December of 2025. In order for me to be able to do that, that means that I need to have certain things set in place before I can actually take the leap. That means that I need to save up a lot of money for me to have a good contingency plan. That will mean I also need to be moving out of this house and go to a different apartment. So that also requires me to have money saved up. And I could take the leap and be like, okay, I'm going to do that right now. No, like, it's already a risk. And you want to make sure that the damage that you experience while you take the risk is as low as it can be. A risk will always be a risk, and there will always be damage, but you want to minimize that damage as much as possible. So in order to do that, you have to be a bit realistic and keep yourself in check and not make decisions that something that is very powerful to do is to manage your decision making that comes from the emotions that you experience. Because we as ambitious men, we want things to go quickly. We want to make that progress. We don't want to wait. We want to live towards being the greatest version of ourselves. But this is where being the greatest version of ourselves comes in, is by not allowing the emotions to influence us in a way that it will then cause us to bring more damage than actually is necessary. You want to minimize that damage as much as possible, but there will be damage regardless. So in order to not make an impatient decision that in the future will then lead you to regret it, you have to control your impulses and you have to become aware of them. Part of being an ambitious man is accepting that this is your reality, accepting that, yeah, you're not supposed to be talking to everybody related to your goals, related to your vision, related to everything that you want to accomplish, because it will contradict the perspective of most people. You will be very polarizing, and so you have to do that with the right people, not just with anyone. Yeah, this is the thing. You don't really meet a lot of people who are thinking the same way like you, and that you can keep each other in check to make sure that you don't drift off, but at the same time, motivate each other. Because you guys will be taking risks. You guys will be making decisions that other people aren't making. And we are creatures of community. We need to have people around us. But not anybody will just fit that description of that what you think is right. So I hope you've been able to get some value out of this video, and that my story has brought some perspective on how I have lived inauthentically and afraid of taking risks and making and living towards the things that I desire to have in my life and to the person that I want to be. Because now that I have recognized this and have started to disassociate myself from talking to people who don't align to the vision, from surrounding myself with people who are actually more aligned to my vision, to being realistic and to creating a plan that I can follow, which then minimizes the risk of the damage that will be caused whenever I make the leap. The last thing that I want to say is, if you want to manage your emotional behaviors to make better decisions, then click the first link in the description box. I want to wish you a very nice day, and always remember that you are 100% responsible for the results in your life. Make the hard decision today, and I'll see you in the next one. All right? Bye-bye.